I wrote one called Substation 9 that um, is probably the most recent one I wrote that I'm very happy with, which is
Hmm.
basically just an exploration of underground places. It includes a lot of videos because I work in industrial environments. I have to explore some really creepy basements quite often.
Oh, cool. So you literally like filmed
Yep,
parts of your
yep.
work set essentially.
Yeah, and not very
That's awesome.
adeptly, but I didn't have to film it adeptly because the point of it is to be creepy, and it's pretty creepy when like the camera's just swinging around.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing is it's some dude just
Mhm.
filming.
Right.
Uh, so I think that works perfectly.
Mhm.
Uh, can I ask? I know I'm not gonna try to dox you, and we can cut this out. But what kind of like work do you do that's like
Oh,
industrial related?
all sorts. It's actually kind of hard to narrow it down. I used to work in a refinery. I've worked in paper mills. I've worked in electrical substations. I've worked like basically usually as an operator of some sort. So writing permits for other people to do work, but also uh,
Hmm.
operating machinery. So like shutting down breakers, making sure valves are closed and pumps are off or on, or adjusting those pumps. I do a lot of pump maintenance sometimes. It's a very, very diverse job. It's kind of hard to pin it down to one thing. It's basically uh, a lot of stuff. Right now, I'm doing a lot of pump work, so I'm rebuilding and fixing pumps a lot of times in factories. Like I just come in, make sure the pumps are running. If they're not,
Hmm.
take them apart, figure out what's wrong with them, put them back together, run line from a pump to a process so I can pump the chemicals in, do drawdowns, figure out how much of the chemicals going in that we need, stuff like that. Uh, yeah, a lot of testing. I do a lot of lab testing too sometimes, where they need figure out what's the
Wow,
ORP
I'm
on this.
assuming that's like perfect for inspiring articles and things like that.
A lot of stuff, yeah, yeah. It learns teaches you a lot of the terminology, like a lot of the stuff in what's the article, um, the Laughing Men, which takes place in a refinery. I actually wrote it because I wanted to write a refinery piece. The Laughing Men 2419 and Bethlehem Steel, which is 3352, which are both take place in refineries, and I just basically just said I know how refineries work. Like
Yeah.
I've worked in them most of my life, so I just wrote about the refineries and added like little spooky elements.
Is Bethlehem Steel actually based off of like
Yep,
an accident that occurred?
yep. A couple years, couple decades ago, I believe. Not it wasn't as it's nowhere near as dramatic, but it's
Hmm.
the steel girder that's pictured in it with that inscription is real. Like, and that actually caught a fucking elbow dropped
Oh,
on a
cool.
hydrogen line, and it actually caught it. The way it worked, it wasn't. I don't know if you read the article. In the article, the steel beam basically doesn't
No,
melt,
I did. Yeah,
despite the
I did.
fact that it has every reason to melt. It doesn't. That's
Hmm.
basically the anomaly. It's just like almost
Yeah.
so basic. It's like not barely an anomaly, but in reality, what it was the steel beam was in a spot where the pipe that had run on top of the steel beam that it was supporting had been taken away. So the steel beam's just sitting there doing nothing. And this hydrogen elbow above it dropped, and it was about to hit the ground. And if it hit the ground, we'd all be fucked. But instead, it landed right on top of the steel beam. So it's like, oh god, oh god, oh god, bang, and it just stops, and the steel beam just held it up, and we were like, oh, okay.
Huh.
And so what? Because it was the elbow was sinking off basically from heat, but the steel beam was in the right spot to catch it and supported it. And after that, they were just like, you know what? We're gonna when we rebuild this, we're gonna leave the steel beam there. It really wanted the job of supporting this pipe. It can have it. And so they just included the steel beam in the construction when they rebuilt it because
That's cool.
they needed a
Yeah.
support strut there anyway. Apparently, since the pipe was about to drop, so they just rebuilt the pipe and let the steel beam stay.
I never knew. Well, I guess it's not too surprising given your background now that like you're actually writing about a loosely based on true story kind of deal.
Right. I wasn't there when that happened.
Well,
By the way,
I guess
I should mention.
emphasis on loose.
Like that's
Okay.
not something that happened to
Gotcha.
me. That's something I was told about because I asked about that steel beam when I went out there, and I was like, "Why does this say God bless I beam Bethlehem Steel on it?" And I was told the story, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
So I'm working on a short film, animated film for SCP-3000, and basically the premise of the film is they basically have to do an inspection on an oil rig, and so they use saturation divers if they they try to do remote ROV, but if that doesn't work or fails, they have to send divers down. So I ended up reading a lot about pressurization. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, saturation diving is wild.
Insane.
There's actually a Parawatch article I wrote specifically about saturation diving. I think it's called.
Oh, yeah?
What is it called? Crap. Right, because it's like it's so freaking alien. The bends and everything about like you have to spend like a fucking week under pressure. What is it called? It's let me see. I can't remember the name of it. The Parawatch is just this weird thing I started writing for. Tower B. That's the name of it. It's just called Tower B.
Tower B?
Yes, Tower-B.
I'm gonna check that out.
Because I did a lot of research for it too, because I always found saturation. But a great source of research for this, but I should recommend it, is not for the faint of heart, because it is horrifying what happened, and it's 100% real, which is like, oh, that always makes me leery, because I don't like, I think there are limits in horror. You're not allowed to hijack real events too far. Like I never would use a picture of an actual dead person who died within living memory. I think that's fucked up. Like I'm not going to use, all the corpses I use are like thousands of years old. It's like nobody cares. But like I'm not going to use use like a 50-year-old corpse image or something. And like with real life events, I always think you have to. But anyway, point is that there's a event called the Biford Dolphin incident, which occurred in 1985, which you might want to look up. But again, it is not for the faint of heart, and it is 100% real what happened. And I think
I've read that one, yeah.
Saturation diving, and it's like, oh god, like it shows you what sort of pressure you're dealing with and what it can do to the human body, and it is terrifying.
Isn't that basically where they so basically, for people who don't know, they basically sit in these tanks, these like small metal rooms where they have to stay there for weeks, and so they don't keep them underwater all the time. They lift them in and out of a ship.
Yep.
And so if this is the story I'm thinking about, they basically, to eat, they need to open up almost like an exchange room, so a small little area where they can put the tray of food, close it in, pressurize it, then they open up on the inside of the tank.
Basically an
airlock.
airlock.
What I'm correct.
It's basically just an airlock.
An airlock. That's a good idea. And it's almost like space in a sense, where you have that issue of like dealing with the low pressure and high pressure.
Right. The only thing is it's reverse. Instead of, well, I guess it's not reverse because the interior is the high pressure and the exterior is the low pressure environment. So yeah, same thing. It's just not a vacuum, but it's close enough to a vacuum compared to the inner pressure.
But in this story that I'm thinking of, basically when they didn't actually completely shut the door on the outside, and then they opened the door on the inside, and so
and it violently depressurized,
like instantaneously. I saw some of the photos, and
those are things I would tell people never look up unless, because they're pretty bad. What happened? But it gives you a sense of what sort of terrifying pressure they're dealing with and what it can do to the human body when shit goes wrong. It can really screw you up. I think there was a phrase from it, and I actually used the phrase in the article. Partially forced through a steel orifice, resulting in the bisection of his thoracoabdominal cavity and the violent expulsion of nearly all internal organs. Oh my god.
At least it was quick. Mm-hmm. But one of the other things I didn't realize is they actually breathe a helium-oxygen mix. Right. And so
they sound like Donald Duck. Yeah. They sound like Donald Duck for
and it's very, very hard to understand them on top of that. So that's the one thing that's I had to just ignore in my film where I had them speaking normal pitch because there's just no way people could take that seriously.
That's pretty funny now that you mentioned it, because in writing, I remember in the story I refer to that, the Tower B story of how they sound like Donald Duck. If I was doing that in film, I could not do that. It would not fucking work. No, because you would not be able to take it seriously, even if you could understand them. it would just wreck everything. As soon as you can't build tension if they sound like Donald Duck.
I was thinking though that would be funny if I do a separate cut that is just all realistic audio.
It would immediately remind me. Have you ever seen the YouTube video of orcs speaking normally in Lord of the Rings?
Oh yes,
It would
that's a really good
immediately
one.
be that.
Yeah,
It would basically be just immediately slice out all the dramatic tension and just be like, "Hey boys."
Yeah, I think it would be such an easy thing to do. I think I should do it. It would be a fun one.
Mm-hmm.